Well, welcome everyone to this edition of another virtual New York City Tableau user group. We've got some great presenters today, so really excited to hear from them. Just going to do a quick intro. My name is Jacob. I help lead the Tableau user group here in New York with several others. And so we're excited to be able to bring these events to you virtually now. And so hoping to have one of these meetings every couple months. And so welcome to everyone that if this is your first Tableau user group, I know most times we get a pretty good mix of users that are recurring and ones that are new. So welcome if you're new, and welcome back if you've been to one before. Just to reiterate why we do these, really it's about the community, and Tableau is such a great community, and this allows us to connect with other passionate Tableau users like ourselves, to share knowledge, to collaborate with each other, and most importantly, be inspired. I think we've got a couple of really inspirational talks today. Just a quick agenda here. We are going to have two longer presentations from Dzifa and Alan. And then at the end, Corey's going to give us about 5 minutes of some quick lightning tips. So how can you stay updated? We have several different social network places where you can follow us. So the first one is the usergroups.tableau.com/New York. This will get you on an email list so that every time we're coming out with a new event, you'll get an email and you can be one of the first people to get registered. We have a Twitter where we post out recaps of these as well as information on when we're having new events. And then the LinkedIn groups that you see below, there's a couple of them where we also keep folks informed on when they can get signed up. So the fastest way to get registered right away is just by subscribing for those updates, and then you can also follow us on the socials where we'll tweet out usually the slide decks of these meetings as well. Just a quick little recap on what's going on in the Tableau community. I think it was a few days ago they announced that there's a new Tableau community hub. So I suggest checking that out. It's just at tableau.com/community. It's sort of like a one-stop shop for everything community related, with program updates and a new blog that's going to allow a lot of different voices from the community come together in one place and share anything about Tableau. And then I also enjoyed checking out the student edition of the Iron Viz. So this was students were able to do their own little Iron Viz competition, and there's some winning Vizes posted on the Tableau public blog. So if you're interested and want to be inspired by some of the cool things that some students came up with, go ahead and check that out on the Tableau public blog. And I will stop talking after this slide. We are always interested in folks being able to speak at these, and so obviously the one about hosting is not quite as relevant, but we have a form. If you're interested in speaking at a future TUG, go ahead and fill out the form, and we'll reach out to you. And then with that, I'll throw this slide on at the end in case you missed them, but I'm going to stop sharing and pass it over to our first presenter, which will be Dzifa.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob, for that intro. Just going to share my screen. Okay, so tonight I'm going to be talking about how it started versus how it's going, but the Tableau edition. I'll get a little bit into what that means if you don't spend a lot of time on Twitter and are confused. But before I get into that, I just want to give a brief intro as to who I am. My name is Dzifa Amexo. I am a Tableau public ambassador. I was a part of Millennials in Data, just a quick plug for that. It's a 16-week Tableau bootcamp. They have a version for students and professionals. And I was a part of the student cohort, and I graduated from university in December from Mercy College with a degree in finance and data analytics. I'm also a featured author, and certified as a Tableau desktop specialist. But the most important things on this slide is the fact that I love karaoke, even though I'm not the best singer. And I'm currently watching Lupin on Netflix, which is an extraordinary show. So if anybody has Netflix and are looking for the next greatest thing to watch, I definitely recommend that. So going back to the title of this presentation, how it started versus how it's going. So I would say around late last year, there was a trend going around Twitter where basically people would show a picture or something of how they started, and then a picture now of how it's going. And so usually these were super successful stories of people achieving amazing things and just super inspirational and just made you feel good. But when I was looking at this trend, which I absolutely love, I was kind of thinking there's something missing in between how it started versus how it's going. And so when you think about it, that one thing that's missing is context. And so tonight I'm going to be talking about context as it relates to the importance of context in storytelling. I'm not going to be talking about the context filter. Just want to put that in as a disclaimer. This is really going to be about storytelling and kind of changing your mindset to get you to think about certain things that I have found can improve your storytelling. So just to start off, these are some questions that I personally use as a framework before I start creating a viz. It's just a little background. For the most part, Tableau Public for me is more of a hobby, but I do want this to relate to those of you who use Tableau in the real world. So I still think these are useful as to whether you're doing it as a hobby or personal project, or if you're in the workplace doing like a professional dashboard. So the first thing I ask myself is, who's the audience and what do they already know? So for the most part, it's really good to figure out who your audience is because you want to be able to cater whatever you're creating to their specific needs. The second thing that I usually focus on is figuring out what the main insight is and how or what I want the audience to do or feel after this. So for example, for this presentation, it's more of an explanatory presentation. The main insight that I hope you take away from this is the importance of context when you're storytelling. And so going through that, I've made sure to craft this in a way that I want you to hopefully feel inspired or motivated, or maybe even just look at things in a different light. And then finally, how can I capture and keep the audience's attention? So now having this framework, here are some specific things that I like to look at in terms of titles and tooltips. So when we're talking about context and storytelling, these are the two things I'm really going to focus on where I feel like they can have a huge impact on the way you do storytelling. So first on the left, you can see titles. They're your first impression. They're super important because you really want to grab the audience's attention. And so hopefully this title of this presentation grabbed your attention. You weren't really sure what I was going to talk about, or maybe you were excited, or it just had you questioning, or just it had you interested for the most part. Another thing it does is that it establishes the tone of what your presentation is going to be like. For me, I wanted this to have a fun, lighthearted tone. So that's kind of why I titled it the way I did. It also sets an expectation and can give an insight. And so that's really important because it's probably the first thing that you're going to see in terms of your presentation of a dashboard or viz. And the part that this presentation is going to really focus on is tooltips, which in my opinion is one of the most underappreciated Tableau features. So I really want to focus on this just because I think tooltips are amazing. But just to back that up, why are they amazing? They're customizable, so you can really get creative and enhance your storytelling when it comes to tooltips by going in and just taking a few extra steps that can help you craft that story. And another positive is that it doesn't take up precious dashboard space. So this is really awesome because you may want to add context to your story, but you don't want to sacrifice space on your dashboard. So with the tooltips, you can still have that storytelling aspect, but it's not taking up space. And additionally, it adds a level of interactivity, which is really important because obviously, again, depending on your audience, all of this is dependent on your audience. If they are really wanting that interactivity, this is a good way to add it in. Additionally, it makes details more visible, which is super helpful. Again, let's say you have a lot of, I'd say like aggregated data. I see a lot in like the social good space. You have a lot of numbers, but beneath those numbers, there are people. So tooltips can be really helpful to kind of bring those stories to life. And then finally, Viz and Tooltip, that was a feature that definitely was created before I even started using Tableau, but I think it's super awesome. And again, like just achieves the things I just mentioned. So I'll briefly touch on that. So just in terms of titles, I wanted to provide some tangible examples of dashboards in the community I've seen that I think are really amazing titles. So this viz by Agata was for Makeover Monday, which is a community initiative. It's really awesome. Recommend it if you're just now starting out and want to like practice design, storytelling, all that good stuff. But basically, the title of this viz is Divergent Perceptions of the American German Relationship. So already just with those few words, I know what this is about. America, German, divergent perceptions. So we're having a difference of opinions. And then furthermore, we've seen in the subtitle, she says, Germans see poor relationship with the US while Americans say relations are good. So without even looking at what the chart is, I could instantly know what this is about, know what the insight is. And I think that's really clear and a clever way to number one, like grab your user's attention, but also just make sure that they know like people have a short attention span, myself included. So if you're doing an explanatory visit, it's really nice to just put it up front and have people know directly what that insight is. And so another example, this is another Makeover Monday recently by Azaz. And so you can see here the titles renewables overtake fossil fuels in the EU. So the things I love about this title is that it's very short and sweet to the point. And then the use of color really allows me to instantly know that renewables is blue and I see the chart, the area chart on the right. So I know that's blue. And then fossils are black. So I can see that again on the left. And so again, with the use of the subtitle, you can get the gist of what this viz is and have that insight at first glance. And so now I'm just going to go into a very brief and intro demo section just so you can kind of get a feel of some of the things that I'm talking about. So in this view, I have I have it laid out by region, category, and profit. And so right now I have the title as regional profit, which is fine, but if you're looking at this at first glance, and I wanted this to be an explanatory dashboard, you'd be like, what is the main takeaway? Like, what's the purpose? So the story that I would want to tell with this is that, okay, furniture is not, we're not making a profit. Like something is not going right here. So thinking about like what this could be renamed to instead of regional profit, I'd probably do something like furniture posts a 2.9K loss. And so just something as simple as changing your title. I think when you read newspaper articles and journals, they do a really good job of crafting these headlines that make you want to read whatever they have in the article. And I think we should kind of treat dashboards that same way, of course, if it's explanatory. And so now just going into, this will be the start of the brief section on tooltips, just to give you some practical tips and examples. For those of you who are new to Tableau and might not know what a tooltip is, it's basically this little, I like to call it a like a thought bubble if you have ever seen like cartoons, but for different parts of your viz or your view. So you can see as you hover, you can see it says region, east, profit, whatever. But this is basically just a way to, again, add that interactivity. And in order for something to be shown in your tooltip, it has to be somewhere in the view. So here, obviously, I have region and profit. So that's coming up in my tooltip. If I wanted to have, let's say, discount in my tooltip, I'd have to drag that to either detail or tooltip, drag it into tooltip, and you see now you can see the discount. One thing when it comes to customizing tooltips that I think just really, it honestly takes a few seconds, but the point, if you're already questioning, like, what's the point of this? Why does this matter? One of my old managers used to tell me that people do business with people that they like and trust. And I think that that can be applied to all aspects of life. People interact with dashboards that they like, that they look like appealing, and that they trust. And so then that begs the question, how do you build that trust? And I think doing some of these little tips are really key ways to build that trust with your user so they can really want to engage with whatever you're presenting to them. So going off of that, one quick thing that you can do if your tooltips aren't automatically aligned is to highlight the selection that you want and move this tab stop to whatever inline that you would like. And that's just something that's really simple. It takes 2 seconds, but it really just shows that you're thinking of the user experience. Another thing that I find myself turning off is this include command buttons. So just in terms of me as a person, I'm very curious. I like to click around things. And let's say, for example, you create a dashboard and you're presenting it to this user and they click around, they accidentally click keep only. And that person would be me, honestly. And so now they're stuck with this view and they're confused. They don't know how to get back. So in terms of the back to the tooltip window, if you uncheck include command buttons, again, this is dependent on who your audience is and what the use case is, but that allows you to turn off that little window that pops up. Another quick thing that just saves time if you have a lot of these fields is to just click it one time and you can change the color, the font, instead of having to click and highlight, you can just tap into it and change it. And so another thing that I do, which can be seen as a lot of this can be seen as like unnecessary, but I firmly believe that it really is the little things that matter that can again build that trust. But it's just the idea of instead of just leaving this in region, discount profit, to turn this into an actual sentence. Because as humans, we have low attention spans, myself included, but we naturally just understand sentences better than just things listed. And it's easier for our brain to process. So instead of having this as region, some discount profit, I would probably just say include the text. This right here, whenever you see the little two arrows, that's pretty much a dynamic, not a dynamic field, but it will change according to whatever the field is. So this is going to say like the east, central, whatever region. So I'd say the blank region has a discount of, and then I'd move this all the way over here and made a profit of blank. So of course, this is not like formatted nicely, but I just wanted to illustrate the point that this is probably easier for most people to read than that being listed out in the little chart. And another thing that I recently just learned in terms of accessibility, which I think is really important, and I'm excited that the Dataviz community as a whole is working to prioritize this because it's really important. But the fact that people who are neurodivergent, it's easier for them to read sentences versus like things that are like scattered and maybe fields that don't make sense. So I think this is also like another way for you to increase your storytelling, but also like add to that level of accessibility. If you have not seen it, Adam Miko and Hunter Hansen gave a talk about designing and just data and the intersection between being neurodivergent. And I think that it's a really important talk that everyone should just watch because accessibility is like an important thing that we should all be considering. It should not be an afterthought. And I'm still learning myself, so just wanted to plug that. So the next thing that I'm going to show is conditional formatting within your tooltips. This is super useful because it kind of just feeds into your pre-attentive attributes. So this view, I have it listed out as your subcategory by profit. And so you can see that just normally like it's in the normal font and color. But what I would love to have is if profit, whenever it was positive, was that it would be green. And then whenever it was negative, the profit would be blue. Just so I can, again, have that like confirmation that like, okay, green is positive, blue is negative. So what you can do is create a calculated field. I'm going to call this color positive. And basically what this is going to say is if the sum of your profit is greater than or equal to 0, then sum profit. Cool. I always just refuse to drag things in, even though it'd be way easier. But basically this is saying if the profit is positive, then return the whatever value is positive. And so we're going to take that and duplicate that to just switch that and make it a negative. So this is again for our negative profit or loss, if you want to call it that. Change to negative, flip this sign. Okay, so now we're going to go into our tooltip and we're going to replace this field with the two fields that okay, quick lesson. So if you want it to show up in your tooltip, like I mentioned, you have to put it in your view. So because it wasn't in my view, I couldn't add it in. So I'm going to add in color positive and color negative. And so the really cool thing about this is that it's going to like only show, it's not going to show both the positive and the negative profit. Whichever one meets the condition, it will show. So I'm going to make the positive blue and the negative, or sorry, the positive green and the negative blue. Okay, and so now you can see profit. Of course, the formatting isn't there. But you can see profit returned to green and the loss returns a blue text. And that's super helpful. It takes like a few seconds and just again like adds to that confirmation of like what you're being showed. The next thing I'm going to show really quickly is how to insert a Vision tooltip. So there are a ton of other resources that go really into depth on this topic, but I just wanted to give a brief overview and just present the idea. So basically, I wanted to, here I have a view of the state by profit, but I want to see within each state how each subcategory is performing. And so what I'm going to do is go into this tooltip. And here, if you go into insert, you can see that you can insert different sheets. So I'm going to insert my previous sheet, which is named color. And now, if you hover over this, you can see which subcategories made the most profit and that breakdown. And one thing that I think is really helpful to add in, and just in terms of like design, it just looks cleaner and it just adds a level of, I'd say, like user experience, but no, it just looks good, is to add in a divider. So basically you can create a new sheet and just create a 0 placeholder. And then I'm going to hide this header, entire view. And then I'm going to go into format and just hide these grid lines. Really briefly, and the 0 lines, there we go. So now I'm gonna go back into my Vision tooltip, come here, and I want a little divider line before I show my breakdown of subcategories. So I can go to insert, divider, and then you can always, it doesn't matter like what sheet you insert, you can always edit the width and the height. So I'm going to edit this to a height of, let's say 10. And so now when you hover, you can see, of course I can make that line a little bit longer. I could extend the width, but you can see that there's a little divider and just adds to the visual appeal of the tooltip. Last thing that, or the second to last thing I'm going to show is something that I encountered when I was doing a personal project viz. And so it was for the diversity in data, which is a new community initiative to basically like visualize data sets about diversity. But it was basically showing the breakdown of Fortune 500 female CEOs. And so I wanted to take that further and do a breakdown of women of color. But basically I was looking at the data and there were years where there were no women in CEO positions. And so I wanted to still show that there were 0 women and present a different tooltip versus the other categories and years that had women. So basically I was trying to figure out how to have a different tooltip for null values. And so I'm going to demonstrate this with this view of the products and the discount amounts. So basically here you can see that the default tooltip is that, okay, product name discount, that's fine. But basically I would want it to say something different if there was no discount. So maybe just say there's no discount. So what you can do is create a calculated field. We're going to call it null tooltip. And so we're going to start out with if. Just type this out. So this is basically saying the Xeon function basically takes null values and returns it as like a 0 just so it can like appear or something. So it's saying if the discount is 0, then no discount. Those are the words that I want to show in the tooltip. Else, so if that's not true, if the discount is greater than 0, then I want it to show the words discount. Wow, fingers are slipping tight. Discount plus we have the sum of the discount. But then you want to wrap this in a string format. And that's just because the tooltip is presented in a text string format, but the discount is in a like whole number format. So you want it to be able to return it as like text pretty much. Okay, and then end. Okay, calculation is valid. So we're going to drag this into tooltip and we're going to take out everything and just leave this as the field. And so now if you see here where it's 0, it says no discount. Let's scroll to one that has a discount. discount. Okay, I forgot the semicolon. But basically, you can see that it combines the text that I had and also the amount from the field. So this is a really, I think, like nifty way if you want to have two different tooltips for like your null values, you want to say something else, but you want your actual values to have a different way. And of course, you can like customize it to like round it and things like that. But that's just a really basic overview of the benefit of that. And then lastly, this one is a tip that I use all the time just because it doesn't use up any space. And I think it's really important to sometimes when you're doing a complicated chart type or something, people may not know how to read it or they don't know where to start. So this is an info or a help button tip in the form of a tooltip. So again, I'll just make a quick 0 placeholder. It's my favorite thing to do. And then just change this to shape. Of course, we'll hide the header and the grid lines. And then so once you've loaded a shape into your Tableau repository, it'll appear in this little list. But I have a light bulb icon, which will be perfect. Okay, so I have that. We'll just turn this into your entire view. And of course, you can take away the 0 lines, but just for the sake of the demonstration, I would go into this and say, for example, how to read left to right. That is super basic, but the point of this is just saying that, let's say you have, again, like you have a dashboard, something that's not intuitive to your user, it would be really helpful. Just throw a help button or an info button in the corner of your dashboard and then include instructions on how to navigate, how to reset the dashboard, whatever it may have you, just so they can know how to interact with the dashboard. And so that was the last tip that I have to share. These are some of the resources that I referenced. Again, I think this neurodiversity talk is super important. Everyone should watch it. And just a few of the links that I referenced in my talk. Thank you for listening. And I hope this inspired you, or at least just encourage you to change your mindset or just think a little bit more about your audience and the user experience, because even though they are little things can add up and really help you build that trust and gain that user adoption. Thank you. Stop sharing now. Okie dokie.
All right, thanks so much. That was awesome. A few of those tips even blew my mind. I didn't know you could make the like in the tooltip change how it's aligned with all the fields at once. And I really liked the divider tip as well. There was, speaking of accessibility, a question about if screen readers can read tooltips. I'm not sure if you know the answer to that.
Ooh, that is a really, really good question. Honestly, I do not know the answer to that, but I will reference, oh my gosh, I cannot remember his name, but someone in the community who's a Zen master just released a blog article, I think yesterday, the other day, as an example of like a screen reader reading his viz, and it was really just atrocious. But that's something that I would like to inquire about, so I'll find out and share that tip later.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, I love all the action in the chat. Keep that going with our next presenter, who's going to be Alan. And I'm also going to throw a link to Dzifa's Tableau public profile to go check out all of her awesome vizzes and give her a follow out there on Tableau public. But yeah, we'll hand over the reins to Alan. He's going to teach us how to build better dashboards.
Yes, well, thank you everyone for joining. I'm excited about this talk. So the title of it is Building Better Dashboards, and that is looking at accelerating our data culture. So this won't be a tips and tricks for dashboards per se, but it is a guide to helping build better ones in terms of making sure that we have all the information that our audience needs. So this is going to be around accelerating our data culture, and my theory is that that can be done through empathy. So some of the things that we're going to cover today is, data empathy will accelerate your data culture. As we all know, we have so many data tools out there that has given us and many other of our business counterparts the ability to visualize data quickly and easily. So that when you combine that with the amount of data that we now have in organizations, most of us are not even tapping into 10% or 12% of all the data that our companies have. So the other concept is that data empathy, what I'll be talking about today, is understanding where your data flows, but most importantly, how your organization is consuming it. And my thing is leading with empathy will eventually help us to increase our data literacy or our familiarity with data. And this will get organizations closer to data democratization. And when I say that, that means that it'll get us closer to trusting a wide audience to be leveraging our data and making sure that it's being used correctly. And one of the things that we see in a lot of organizations is that we see a lot of silos. So we have a lot of different departments or a lot of different talents that are in different areas of the company. And so one of the things about data empathy is that it will start to bring people together because we need to all roll our sleeves up and to start solving the solutions rather. So I want to do a little bit about me. My career is pretty much can be defined as I've always been in a position where I've been able to bridge the gap between data and business. So I've either been so I started out as a civil engineer. So I sat in a cube all by myself calculating things. And then I wanted to, get out career-wise to kind of engage with different groups. So I ended up being a business systems analyst for a while. So that's where I get to analyze different platforms. It was email platforms at the time. And I get to write, different business requirements for sales teams, business teams. And then I progressed to more of a customer analytics manager. That's when I started looking at customer behavior. And a lot of that involved helping my executive teams understand where we were in terms of who was engaging us and how our sales are doing. And having to do so many PowerPoints at a large company inspired me to become a data storyteller. So a lot of times we have to have presentations that appeal to broad audiences. A lot of like what Dzifa was saying, that you want to make sure people know what they're doing, even on your dashboard. So it's not just your presentations, but also your dashboards and your visualizations that you have. You can also feel free to follow me at my Twitter handle. Currently, going back to what I currently do, I'm a Tableau social ambassador. I curate an article series. I'm very passionate about data literacy and also data visualization. So one of the things that I've learned in my career is that the build it and they will come approach to reporting or dashboards, it doesn't work. A lot of times I've had a lot of my data teams build things in a silo, assuming that we knew what people wanted. And a lot of times we would, set up a little metric to see what our engagement is like, and nobody's using the dashboard. We spent 2 months doing this, no one's using it. So that was always frustrating. The other thing that I've learned, which helps, is that the most important foundation of a data team is a thriving community. So even within your team, you need to be a cohesive set, but then also you need to be able to go out into the organization and engage other teams as well. Because what I see happens a lot, and I definitely would love you guys to engage with me. So if you have seen one of these questions or statements before, you can put it in the chat box, the letter A, B, C, D, or E, or F. But the main issue that we see a lot in companies is that a lot of times data teams do not have the full understanding of the business. They don't always understand all the business context. And at the same time, the business side doesn't always understand what it takes to do some of the things that they're asking. Like, we keep hearing like, why is this report taking so long? And then on the data side, we're like, well, my boss expects magic. And so we have a lot of these questions going around, and it causes a gap. It causes a lot of gaps, miscommunication. So data communities can improve if everyone has a space to collaborate on complex business challenges. And today's environment, business has become very challenging. I mean, we have a pandemic, but before that, a lot of companies have industries that are very competitive. Everyone has to have the latest and greatest idea like yesterday. So, the more that we have a sense of community and connection, the easier, challenges can be solved. So my thing is that the path to data democratization is through empathy. And so as we know, empathy is the ability to see a situation from someone else's frame of reference. It's like walking a mile or at least 10 Manhattan blocks in someone's shoes. So data empathy, just to make it more contextual to what we're talking about, again, it's that willingness and it's that dedication to deeply understand how people use, interpret, and share data. And I just have a quick comic here just to kind of talk about how most companies, we ingest a ton of data and we do a lot of transformation, or we have our data warehouse team build all the data tables, roll them up, and then we have our analysts. They start to analyze, and then we have people who are visualizing the data. But then we get to our audience, and you see all the question marks. People don't fully get what's happening. So a lot of times, this is the overlying story that most organizations are experiencing. So that's why it's crucial to understand how members feel about the data process, people outside of the data teams. So how can we be more empathetic at work? One of the things I like to say is that, we should be able to expose team members to talents they may not have. So, in our business where we're doing a lot of dashboards, we always get people who want to know more about Tableau, like they want to learn it. And Tableau, fortunately, is a very intuitive tool that's easy to use. And so that's one of the ways that, if we can make our lives easier by people doing some of the work that is a little bit repetitive to us, it gives us more time to do more of the complex things. So exposing people to talents they don't have can be a very good thing. For some of us who want to self-learn, we explore curiosity through an introductory course. There's a lot of free material out there. We can also tell our counterparts as well. One of the things that I think works in an organization is when we start to attend those meetings that fill up our calendar, but we should drop in on some of them, like our stand-up meetings or those project meetings, because those give us more of that holistic view of what's going on. So I can start seeing what's happening outside of what I'm doing. Like I may just be analyzing one component of a bigger project. If I go to these meetings where I see different, talents or roles, and we're sitting at the table, I can say, oh, this is where my part plays in the bigger picture. Another way is just to create a glossary of terms so people can speak each other's language. There's a lot of terminology and acronyms that goes on in corporations. And even within the corporations, certain teams have acronyms, and it'll just be good to share with people what those mean or to actually spell them out. That also can help. And one of the things that I think really works, the last one, is creating engagement meetings where stakeholders can exchange questions and bridge the gaps. This is a good opportunity when you are building a standing up reporting for people, that you can go to the meetings, understand what they're looking for. You can tell them what's possible, what's not possible, and it just makes things go quicker. So let's kind of walk through an example to put this into practice. So one of the things that, as we go through this, to ask yourself, is how much do you know about your company's business? Having context as you'll understand is going to be very important. So just ask yourself, how much do you know about your company's business? Think about how often your organization engages cross-functionally. And also think about, how would you describe your company's data culture? Is it collaborative? Is it complex? Is it a work in progress? And also ask yourself, what role do you see yourself in the organization? And we'll get more into that as I continue. So I'm using this example called Mocha. They're a fictitious coffee delivery company, and they help small coffee houses have the technology that a Starbucks or something would have. So it allows them to have more data insights, share services, and they decided that they wanted to sign up more shops in the San Francisco Bay Area. So this is where key leaders, stakeholders have been meeting with the analytics team to shortlist prospective coffee houses to target. And it's important to have these types of meetings. So Mocha has this environment, this fictitious company has this environment where they are engaging each other on a normal cadence of maybe a monthly engagements. And the project team, they've been working on a dashboard that's going to help them track prospective coffee house locations as well as their distance from current customers. It come up in the meeting that if we knew how close we were to current customers, it may help us acquire new customers easier. So when Mocha has this data engagement strategy, and this approach I'm about to explain, it helps you understand that instead of looking at your actual title in the organization, that you look at your talent. So there's going to be some roles in the organization that are going to automatically have certain talents in them. And there's like project manager or data analyst in your data team. But this is actually an article by Scott Baronato. He did it at Harvard Business Review. And so he has identified that these 6 talents rather, pretty much is across all different organizations. So you have your subject matter expert, which I like to call the captain. They're usually the person who has the context. They can keep everybody, from going into scope creep. They can kind of lead the project. You have your storyteller. Your storyteller is important because they are your translator. They can help, both sides of the company, business and data, understand what's happening because they have that ability to be able to look at data and to tell a story. So then you have your data wrangler. I call them the chefs because they like to slice and dice data. They're usually the ones who helps you get your data sets, or they aggregate and disseminate. You have your project manager. They're usually keeping everyone under control as the ambassador. And you have your designer. So your designer is someone who is like your visual communicator. They can help you with the aesthetics of your presentations. They can help you with the aesthetics of your dashboards just to make sure how people are digesting the data the way that they need. And then you have your data analyst. Now this role, coincidentally or ironically, a lot of companies don't have them. Like there are a lot of people who have that title, but a lot of times that gets caught up or mixed up with a data wrangler. A data analyst is someone who actually should have more of that critical thinking ability. They don't necessarily have to be a programmer, but they should be able to pull out the insights or to pull out the trends to help people to really get thinking about what's going on. So I'm trying to be mindful of time. So those are the main roles. And then you can have these roles. And the idea that Scott had is that you can look past what your official title may be. So you may be someone who works in strategy and sales, but you have good project management ability. So the good thing, the benefit of having that is that not only do you have the project management talent, but you also have some context because you're the one in strategy. You need this dashboard to help you acquire customers. And so that way, when all these people are at the table, they can start asking the right questions. Like one of the questions that the data side may have is, what coffee house makes a good prospect? Like when you're analyzing all this data, how do I identify, or what parameters should I use to identify what's a good prospect? And on the same side, one of the things would be, well, we can track prospects within a 10-mile radius from a current customer. And that's something that, you bring to the table to see, well, can that even be done? So as we start this collaborative process, it helps people to understand like what they do day to day, but it also helps you as the individual to understand like where your role fits into the big picture. So this is where team members begin to see a part they play in the overall picture. So just wanted to say that, Tableau has also done a playbook, and I also aligned with some of it, that, when you lead with data empathy, that creates trust. It allows you to have more confidence that your team, every part of your team knows more about what's going on business-wise as well as the data. And that way it kind of starts to narrow the gap. And it also strengthens the commitment because now that you're excited about collaboration, you'll feel more motivated to work in your projects. It expands your talent because as you start to collaborate, you see that there's other things that you'd like to learn. So that can only help the organization. And it also encourages sharing. As people work together, they're willing to share more. They're willing to maybe get that data over to you quicker because you've established a relationship. And it also begins to change your mindset because you broaden your mindset. You've seen what goes on in your organization besides you and your role. And this was just more or less an exercise that people can take. We talked about it, an understanding of identifying the talents that you may have. You may have a team and you want to create this project team, and you can start identifying, okay, these are the type of talents that I need for this project. And as you start identifying people, you can see that people have more than one talent. And some of the talents can also be complementary, like data wrangling and data analysis is going to be something that sometimes people have both automatically. But you may also have someone who's good at storytelling and design, and they're a data analyst like Carl. And then you start to look at your overall depth of your project team. You can see, okay, we may not be as heavy project management, data wrangling wise, but we're definitely heavier on the storytelling side or the data analysis side. And so this is just, as we begin to understand each other's experiences, it creates that understanding and that empathy. And what we will see overall is an increase in productivity. It will definitely encourage people to get more familiar with their data, which in turn will improve data governance, because not only now do you have the data side's perspective of what these data points mean, you also have that business context to go with it. And that ultimately just makes the company a little bit more effective. So that was all I have for now. I definitely can answer any questions. Apologies if I breezed through that. I was just trying to make sure that I had enough time. So that's all I have.
Awesome.
Yeah, so yeah, if there's any questions, I don't see the chat window or anything like that. So 1 second.
Yeah, feel free to pop any questions you have in the chat. If we don't have any questions, yeah, pop any in there as we move on, but we can go ahead and end the night with some lightning tips from Corey Jones.
I thought you were just stopping you, so we're ending the night. I was like, oh, my job here is done. Alan, let me see if I can share. I might need you to stop.
Oh, yeah, let me stop sharing.
I think I can override.
Yeah.
So I was very relieved when Alan started and he said that he was not going to be doing any tips, because Dzifa already stole one of my tips, and I was afraid that I was going to run out of tips by the time it got to me. So it was a relief, Alan. But thank you guys both for presenting. I thought they were great, and I know there's been a lot of positive in the chat. So hopefully I can leave you guys before you get out of here with a few extra tools to put in your tool belt as you're using Tableau. The first tip I'm going to talk about is a tip that I call preserving formatting. So this is one that I came up with when I was preparing for IronViz, and I was looking for ways to be able to duplicate sheets and swap out dimensions that were on my sheet and not lose all the formatting I've done. So as you can tell on this sheet here, I've spent a lot of time to format my text and get it absolutely beautiful, and really focus in on my design here of the color of my text. And tragically, if I wanted to right click and kind of duplicate this sheet and then reuse this formatting, but instead of having state up here, I wanted to bring in subcategory, you'll see what happens. Hold on 1 second. I've already taken let me just do this with a blank sheet, because this has already been done once. So I'll show you again. So if I come here to state, I come in here and I format this real quick, and I change my font back to this nice orange font, and I bring in sales, and I quickly sort my data table here, descending or ascending, doesn't really matter. And now I bring in my subcategory and replace it. I lose all of my formatting here, which is very sad. But I can undo this, and there's a way to prevent this from happening. And the way to do that is actually double clicking within your pill here. And you can then change your field to anything that you want. So I can change just backspacing out state and putting in subcategory. And when I hit enter, it preserves the formatting that was done to this original pill. So my original pill was state, again, if I undo, and then by coming in here and changing this to subcategory, the sorting, the color, anything else that you've done to format that field would still remain. So that's one quick way that if you need to duplicate sheets and you've done a lot of custom formatting ahead of time, you don't have to restart when you need to replace a field on your worksheet. The second one that I am going to look at is just a couple of tips around the calculated field window. So one of the first things that I don't know if people realize is that there's very small underlines up here at the top around, and what that is it's similar to Excel that you can have keyboard shortcuts. So the first thing around calculated fields that I just always have gotten in the habit of doing is I know that the keyboard shortcut Alt-A-C will bring up a calculated field window for me. So very quickly I can just hit Alt-A-C and I get to my calculated field. So you don't really have to take your kind of fingers off the keyboard and you can quickly jump into your calculated field. Two more tips while we're here in the calculated field. The one is, well, first off, if you're unaware, there's a very sneaky little expand arrow here if you're new to Tableau. And when you expand it out, it will show you all the functions that are available for you to use. And if you click on one of these, it'll kind of give you a bit of a description of how that function works and the syntax around it. But one of the nice things that this gray pane off to the right-hand side also does is that if you pull in a calculated field, so a field that has already been built and is now in your measures or dimensions, if you click on that field, the gray pane over here now tells you what that formula is in your calculated field. So you don't have to right click and say edit calculated field, which would then close out this current calculation. You can just simply click on it, and by having this pane open here, it'll tell you what that calculated field is. The last tip I will have is if you ever find yourself presenting and you want to make sure that your calculations that you're typing out are visible to your audience, or we get to the fact that we're ever back in an office and you're presenting on a screen or around a table or something, you can hold down Control and hit the plus button, and that will blow up the font on your calculated field so that when you type in whatever you're going to type in, it's much larger and easier to see, and then Control minus brings it back down. So just a tip around presenting with calculated fields. Again, if we find ourselves in a presentation, most of the time, well, not most of the time, but often I would say, you're probably sharing your dashboard with people on Tableau's server. But there is one tip if you are presenting your dashboards to your manager or someone and you want to make sure that you're not wasting time with every individual dashboard loading, and you want to kind of pre-calculate those views, you can come to this little grid. And this tip, I have to give a hat tip to Divya, who's a new team member on my team, and she was showing me this tip. But by bringing yourself to this grid view, which is in the very bottom right-hand corner, you can right-click and you can say refresh all thumbnails. And by doing that, Tableau goes through and it pre-calculates all the views, almost like you had gone through and clicked on every single tab or worksheet within your workbook, so that when you go to each one, they load instantly. So that little second or two of delay, or maybe longer, depending on how much data and how complex your views are, that all can be done kind of pre-processing like that, so that when I come into any one of these dashboards, it loads instantly, and I can move to the next one and it loads instantly. Also, just a couple other things around kind of sheet navigation, tab navigation. This grid is also helpful. If you do color your tabs, you can see at the very bottom here the color. So these are all my red tabs that I grouped together. Maybe I want to move this one up so that it's with all my red ones. So you can re-navigate all of your tabs here. As well as if I'm back in this view, if you ever find yourself having tons of tabs and you're stuck clicking through to get all the way to the end, you can always use the window menu up at the top, and this lists out all your tabs. So if I want to jump to dashboard number 10, whatever that is, you can click on that and it'll jump you right to where you want to go. So a couple of different little tips there about kind of overall navigation. One newer feature, well, not really newer at this point, but one feature that I think kind of still sits under the radar sometimes is if I come in here, I right click, I duplicate my sheet, and I've built a similar but maybe different visualization. So in this case, I'm just going to take off color. I no longer decided color was needed, or maybe I built a whole new visualization altogether. But regardless, I end up back on my dashboard and I want to replace this visual in the bottom left-hand corner with my new visual. Previously, what you would have to do is you have to find that visual, which I actually did not pay attention, so I have no idea what it is. Whatever, we'll just use this one anyway. And what you would do is you would kind of like drag this one in and then delete the other one out and maybe have to resize them or do whatever you need to do. The feature or the tip that I'm showing here is if you click on the worksheet that you want to replace and then you hover over any of these sheets, this little swap icon appears, and just by clicking on that, it swaps the sheets in, so you don't have to worry about resizing or doing anything like that. So again, a simple way, and if you know it, it's obvious. If you don't know it, then you usually are like, oh, I wish I knew that. So my last tip, and this is the abbreviated tip, is that you can use Unicode shapes anywhere that you can use text in Tableau. So in the title, you can see as a placeholder for me, I just dropped in these Unicode up and down arrows. But where we're actually going to use these arrows, so I'm just going to copy them, is in the formatting of my variances. So I've created a little KPI chart that shows me the sales by region, and then it also shows me the variance of the sales versus a forecast. So we can see Central is up and the other 3 regions are down. And if I want to add a little bit of extra flair to that variance, I can come into my field here, which is called sales versus forecast, and I can change the default number format. And instead of having something like automatic, maybe I want to start with a currency format and go down to 1 decimal point and scale it to thousands. But now, just by doing this, I'm not getting any of that extra formatting. What I want to do is I want to now take this predefined format structure, or this the format structure, and edit it. So if I change it to custom, we'll now see I have the currency format here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the brackets to indicate a negative number. And then right after the semicolon right here, which separates the positive format string from the negative format string, I'm going to paste in those Unicode shapes that I copied. I'm going to leave the down arrow after here for the negative, and I'm going to paste again the up arrow before the positive. And then when I say okay, we'll see now I have an up arrow for any positive variances and a down arrow for any negative variances. I could have also applied this directly in the format pane here, and we'll see that it's now here under automatic because it's inheriting the default property. The difference between right-clicking on the pill here and formatting and right-clicking on the pill here and formatting is that this default property carries through to anywhere else that you use this pill in the workbook. So this is kind of your global format for that pill. Again, now my can be abbreviated version is this dynamic formatting that was showed earlier in the night. What I did here was I created 2 calculated fields. Same concept that was shown before, except my then clause is a down arrow. So if my sales forecast is less than 0, I'm showing a down arrow. And then in this calculated field, I'm showing if sales forecast is less than 0, show an up arrow. Same explanation that was given before. These fields are mutually exclusive. So it's either going to be above 0 or below 0. So as a result, I'm never going to see both an up arrow and a down arrow when I add these to my labels. So I take this sales forecast and up arrow and add it to my labels. And now all my labels, I can stack these right next to each other. You don't need a space in between because again, they're mutually exclusive and only one of them will ever show up. So just having the space at the end means that I'll either show a down arrow and then a space and the value, or an up arrow and then the space and the value. And having the two separate fields allows you to put two different types of colors on it. So red for down and blue for up, which means that I'll be left with a blue arrow and a red down arrow. Again, a way to kind of encode a little bit of good and bad using that pre-attentive attribute of color, without really taking up a lot of real estate or doing a lot of hard development work on your dashboard. So those are my 5 plus a couple extra lightning tips. Hopefully you guys learned something new somewhere along the line there. And thanks for letting me be a part of this great lineup that you guys had this evening. Hope you enjoyed all the talks.
All right, round of applause for all of our presenters. That was great. Lots of new things I learned. And orange headers is definitely a DataViz new best practice for charts and Tableau, is having those big bold orange headers.
Yeah, everyone's got to have their signature, Jacob.
Yeah, love that. All righty. Again, thanks to all our presenters. I'll be posting the slide deck and perhaps with permission from the presenters, their decks as well, on Twitter and LinkedIn, some of the social medias that we showed to follow on. And yes, stay tuned for announcements regarding our next virtual tug. And we hope to see you all back then.